Welcome. This is an audio presentation entitled Revalidation MOT, Medicine on Track. This is brought to you by Susie Edwards, BMA Medical Careers Consultant. I'm delighted to welcome Divya Patel, GMC Revalidation Policy Manager, and Kim Tolley, GMC Regional Liaison Advisor. The purpose of this presentation, based around an audio version, is that we've been running a series of webinars through BMA Careers, through the Developing Your Career site. And one of the things that's happened is that there are certain sessions which are extremely popular. And it's no surprise that revalidation is something that is popular. And why is that? It's popular because it's current. There are a number of things that you need to know about, and we're here to provide some insights and thoughts on how you can bring all this together. The aim of the session really is to cover 4 key sessions. The aim of this audio presentation is fourfold. First of all, we want you to really start to think about how you can prepare for your up-and-coming revalidation. And secondly, to share insights and tips to help you to create a checklist of the range of evidence that you need to gather over the 5-year period. Where these 2 things have came from is from a number of members getting in touch and non-members saying, we'd love to know what we need to prepare, but more than that, we don't know what we need annually, we don't know what we need over the 5-year period, and hopefully today we'll be able to start to think about that checklist of what you require. To complement the session, there will be a range of resource material available, and one of the things that we'll aim to do is to put together a table of information that will provide you with that insight. The final 2 parts of this are looking at something which isn't really covered in great detail, but which is actually so important to do in the context of revalidation. And it's thinking about the importance of really trying to articulate your reflective practice. And what I'm very interested in doing, and I'll lead on this part of it, is thinking about what is reflective practice. What can you try and do to sort of write that down in a way that's meaningful for you, but also provides great insight for anyone else who's reviewing it. But overarching all of this is just to think about how revalidation can have an absolute positive impact for your career and professional development. Because in many ways, what it allows you to do is to take stock, to reassess and to sort of prioritise areas that you want to work on over the next 5 years ahead. I'm now going to hand over to Kim Tolley.
Thank you for inviting me to contribute to this BMA session. I wanted to talk firstly about some of the broader concepts of revalidation and just talk to you about the fact that revalidation is really a process by which licensed doctors are required to demonstrate on a regular basis that they're up to date and fit to practice. It's really part of a broader system that promotes safety and quality within the NHS. Revalidation aims to give real confidence to patients that their doctor is being regularly checked by both their employer and the General Medical Council. Licensed doctors have to revalidate every 5 years, and of course this is built on a foundation of regular annual appraisals with their employer. The annual appraisal is based on our core guidance, Good Medical Practice, which we'll come on to later, and patients can also contribute to the doctor's appraisal and revalidation by giving regular feedback on the care that they receive. So just to reinforce the fact that only doctors who have a licence to practice will need to revalidate. So appraisal and revalidation are based on Good Medical Practice, our core guidance within the General Medical Council. It sets out the principles and values on which good medical practice is founded. It lays out the duties of a doctor. Good medical practice is used to inform education, training and the practice of all doctors within the UK. It's a very essential guide to read. It forms a standard approach for all appraisals, and that builds on the approach that's taken for revalidation. So revalidation, just to recap again, it's a process that occurs every 5 years, and it must be built on the annual appraisal process, of which Good Medical Practice has its focus and which covers all of your medical practice, and we'll come on to that later. During their appraisal, doctors must discuss their performance, their practice with their appraiser and use supporting information to demonstrate they're up to date and that they meet the principles and values set in Good Medical Practice. So this is really an overview of the supporting information needed for revalidation and appraisal. You can see within the centre of it, we've got Good Medical Practice, which covers the 4 key domains which we looked at in the last slide: knowledge, skills and performance, safety and quality, communication, partnership and team working, and maintaining trust. And what we're going to do over the next few slides is we're going to look at those 6 areas of supporting information for revalidation. We're going to look at them individually and talk to you about what you're going to need to get ready for revalidation. Firstly, continuing professional development. So, continuing professional development is a continuous learning process, and it complements your undergraduate and postgraduate education and training, and it enables you to improve and demonstrate that you're improving across all areas of your practice. Fundamentally, though, you are responsible for your own continuing professional development. Fundamental within continuing professional development is reflection, and we're going to come on to that later. And it's really important that during your continuing professional development you reflect regularly, and that's really very important for your career as a doctor. CPD must be tailored to your specific needs and should be related to your practice. And there are lots of ways that you can demonstrate your continuing professional development, some of which that Susie will come on to later. A lot of colleges and faculties run CPD schemes, and there's lots of guidance on our website about examples that you can use. The General Medical Council doesn't specify the number of CPD points that you need to revalidate, although a lot of Royal Colleges do. But fundamentally, reflection is the key to continuing professional development. And lastly, your employer should facilitate access to resources, including time for you to learn, time for your continuing professional development. Quality improvement activity. It takes many forms, and these are the main sort of 5 examples that we use that the General Medical Council points out. So firstly, an example is a clinical audit. This could be evidence of your participation in a clinical audit or any quality improvement exercise which you're involved in as an individual doctor. Secondly, an example is review of clinical outcomes. This is where robust, attributable, validated data is available. For example, morbidity, mortality statistics or complication rates. So those are routinely recorded within maybe your trust or within your place of work. Case reviews and discussions. Something that lots of doctors get involved in all the time. A documented account of interesting or challenging cases, maybe that you present to a peer, or maybe that you present to a group of medical students or another specialist, or in a multidisciplinary team meeting. Audit. A good example of this would be monitoring an effective teaching programme for FY1s and FY2s, for example. Evaluation of the impact and effectiveness of a piece of health policy or management practice, another example of quality improvement activity. So these are some examples that you can use in your portfolio to demonstrate that you meet this quality improvement activity supporting information. Significant events, a really important area of supporting information. On the slide, it shows a definition of significant events, but I think it's really important to note that significant events are not only negative experiences, there can also be positive experiences as well. It's important that you as a doctor have a responsibility to log incidents or events according to the routine reporting processes within any organisation. And at any appraisal, you should discuss these events with your appraiser and log them and write them up in your portfolio. You should discuss your participation in any clinical governance meetings where such events are discussed. But more importantly, you should think about the lessons learnt. You should think about demonstrating that you're aware of any patterns in types of incidents and events, and you should discuss these at your appraisal. You should look at how they inform your future learning. Perhaps they get you thinking about how you could go and enter into some CPD related to those significant events. The final most important important process with significant events is to take action. Your appraiser will be really interested in any actions you've taken or any changes that you've implemented to prevent incidents or events happening again. That's the most important part. Colleague and patient feedback. I think that often this can be collected using an e-portfolio route, but must fundamentally be administered independently of you and your appraiser. And also it must cover the whole of your practice. So, for example, if you have other jobs within maybe the NHS or as a locum, it must cover both those areas of your practice. You should seek feedback from your patients and colleagues, and really importantly, act on feedback as appropriate. Feedback from colleagues and patients can be collected using standard questionnaires that are available within your portfolios, but that comply with GMC guidance. And on our website, there are some colleague and patient feedback questionnaires that you can actually use. So we talked about it being administered independently of your doctor and your appraiser, and this will enable colleagues and patients to give you views on your behaviour and make sure that it's gathered in a systematic way. So it provides an opportunity for patients, non-medical co-workers, for example, nurses, managers, administrators, and also your medical colleagues, including trainees and juniors, to reflect on the professional skills and behaviour of you, and that's really important. Compliments and complaints. It's really important that we all celebrate compliments. How often don't we? And it's important that you collect information about compliments that are given to you and that you celebrate these with your appraiser. They're often provided by patients and your colleagues, and they should be reviewed as part of the appraisal process. Complaints should also be discussed with your appraiser and can be seen as another type of feedback, allowing you to review and further develop your practice and to make patient-centred improvements. The most important thing about compliments and complaints is that you reflect and you think about the possible actions that you might need to take to sort of move those complaints on, to think about actions that you need to take to improve your practice.
Thank you very much, Kim. What Kim's tried to do over the last few slides is to really begin to think about what kind of supporting information you need, what is revalidation, and more importantly, how can the GMC and the BMA help you with your forthcoming revalidation. For some of you who are listening into the audio presentation, you will have a revalidation coming up soon. For others, you'll be planning ahead. And one of the things that's great about planning ahead is that you get an opportunity to take time to think about everything that you need to gather and collect. But for those of you who have something coming up soon, don't panic. Because the one thing that you can do is start to systematically think about each of the sections and try and work out what areas have you got covered well, and are there parts where you do actually need some extra help and assistance. And towards the end of the presentation, we'll be highlighting where you can get additional help and support, so don't feel that you're on your own at any stage. The other thing that I wanted to do was just to sort of echo something that's quite important that isn't always really articulated clearly. And you find that within the colleges, often they'll sort of recommend a minimum CPD points, and often that's roughly around the 50 mark. So if you think about that over a given 5-year period, you're looking at 250 points. Now, I know all of you out there really like to know what you're working towards. However, what I would say is that the GMC don't actually say that you need to have that many points. And so I think what's really important to think about is the quality of what you actually put down. So it's not about the quantity. And that's really where the reflective part comes into its own. So the reason why I put up this jolly fellow, Leonardo da Vinci, is because this comment I really think that he made a few years ago now. And I'll just read it out to you because I think just hearing it can sometimes just help to reaffirm. I love those who can smile in trouble, who can gather strength from distress and grow brave by reflection. Now, I think the thing that we never do well in life is write down reflection. So what I'm going to do is cover this next section of thinking about how you start to put together reflection in a way where you can write it clearly, but also you're able to have a chance to think about what type of reflection am I doing. So I'm going to start to cover a little bit about what free flow reflection means. Then I'm going to move on to the different styles of reflection and just a little bit about how you can learn and develop using some models to build into your practice. So slide 12. When you look at it, it's actually quite straightforward. And one of the things that you do find within a number of the questionnaires that are available through self-assessment is that you just simply rate yourself. And actually, that's very straightforward. So you have a look at each of the sections. So, for example, what you'll see in the first box is clinical knowledge. And the onus is on you, actually, to sort of rate yourself because this is a self-assessment. And so at that part, you can actually very easily sort of think, well, actually, for me, I feel like I am extremely competent at what I do. I actually excel in some areas more than others. And I've also been developing a range of skills that complement my work set. So therefore, I feel my clinical knowledge is good. Now, for some people, they might say they feel it's very good. Now, there's no right or wrong answer to this. This is purely for you to benchmark your own skills and experience. That's what it's designed to do. That's the main function of it. However, the reason why I brought that up is that that's straightforward. So if we move on to slide 13 for a moment, then that's slightly different because you have space. And this is entitled Free Flow Reflective Section because there are a number of sections like this. And if I just read this out to you. So please add any other comments you may wish to make about your own performance. What do you do? How on earth do you write that? And how easy is it to reflect? And I think that this is the part that I want to now build on, is thinking about the structure, thinking about the content that you put, and more importantly, how you actually reflect. Now, some of you may well know Sean's work very well, but just in case you don't, a series of work carried out sort of in the early 1990s that's been going on for the last sort of 20 years now. And one of the things that was carried on during that time was thinking about reflective writing. And actually looking at reflective writing from two perspectives. One, thinking about reflection in action, and then reflection on action. And I'll just explain this. So, for example, when you're in a situation, so it's a clinical situation that's happening, it's real life, and actually, as soon as you're in that, the knowledge, experience and ability that you've got during that time to self-critique is very much something where you're in the thick of it. So you have ability to reflect based on the fact that you're in it at that moment in time. And that's one type of reflection in action. If we take it the other way, reflection on action is actually quite different. And this is often what people do more of. But they find it hard to articulate. So with reflection on action, it takes place after the event, experience or episode. And what I thought I would do is probably the best way to articulate this is to maybe give an example of my own reflection on action based on a medical education conference that I was speaking at. So one of the things that's really nice when you go to a conference and event is that you get to hear current debate, you get to meet other people and sort of see what's going on within the field of practice. And one of the things that was fantastic was there was this girl who, in her early stages of her career, at this time she was actually an F2, she's now progressed on from this, she was talking about a quality improvement project, which was all around efficiency in the hospital that she was based in. And not to go into too much of the intricacies of it, but one of the things that I really realised that I hadn't thought about in the context of my role within a career and professional development was that fundamentally she was talking about two things. She was talking about the ability to gain sound leadership skills as a consequence of doing a quality improvement project, but also she was able to think a little bit about commercial awareness because she was actually helping the ward become more efficient due to a redesign of a particular space within the building. But more than that, she actually was able to save money. And so there was two things that I came away with that actually I thought, hold on a minute, what I need to be doing when I'm also thinking about career and professional development sessions is how do I make sure that I embed really strong leadership development skills and think about that commerciality. So after that, what I was able to do from my own experience was to note that, but actually to say what I wanted to do in addition to that. So from my perspective, I had an opportunity to learn a new approach and to think about what I could do in a different way to enhance my practice. That's very much a reflection on action. If you want to read more about Sean's work, there's a fantastic article which I put at the bottom of this called Reflective Practitioner, How Professionals Think in Action. So that's easy to access. And if you are a BMA member, you can get that very easily from the BMA library. I also want to make sure that I mention there's a really fantastic publication which will add in as a PDF, as a useful resource that you can access if reflection is something that you're really keen to hone your skills on. So just for a moment, if we think about writing reflection, what tends to happen is we really remember anything that goes wrong. We remember negative experiences, we remember things that we need to learn from. But actually, what's equally important is to reflect on an event that went really well, because having the ability to identify a skill or a quality in your practice that is a strength and how you're continuing to hone this and improve on it is a great and fantastic attribute. And one of the things that if you can do that well, then you're actually able to then, when you have something which is a challenge that you need to develop on, you've actually got both types of things. So you've got a positive one that you do really well, and you've got an area to work on. So a medal and a mission. So you've got two things happening at the same time. Kolb's learning cycle. Now, some of you who are listening will actually be very familiar with Kolb. Other people, it might well be new. And so all I really want to sort of highlight is that when you are actually thinking about sort of writing reflection, there is a kind of 4-step model that can be really helpful. And if I can just talk through this in each step. So step 1, what happens. So actually thinking about what concrete experience are you actually writing about. Reflective observation. What did I experience? Then, why did this happen? So how he identifies this is he uses the terminology abstract conceptualization. But in essence, what he's trying to say there is, why did this happen in this way? And what can I do differently as a consequence of that? And so really, when you are doing reflective writing in practice, I would say that there are often 3 basic components of reflection. Point 1 is, what was the event? What did you personally learn from that experience, and how will this improve or change your practice in the future? Within the RST Medical Appraisal Guide, it outlines that you don't necessarily need to record reflection on each and every item of supporting information. I think that's important because sometimes people that get into contact, they're concerned about having to do every single one. And it's not about that. But what it is about is thinking about yourself in the context of being a good doctor. What is it that makes you a doctor, and what makes you professionally strong in what you do? Ultimately, you're always thinking about elements around patient care. I would say that there are 5 key steps involved in writing reflective practice. Step 1 is really thinking about the description of the activity. So more often than not, you would include the date of the activity and why you've selected this example in particular. Then this part 2, step 2, is thinking about the perception of it. So describe the way that you perceived the event taking place. Think about why things happened in the way that they did. This is quite important because one of the challenging aspects of reflective writing is that you do need to be able to articulate your emotions. And what's important to consider is that how you may have responded to this event may not necessarily be the same as another person or the other people around you. And what can be really useful is to record whether there were any patterns or triggers that elicit certain emotional response within you, and whether there's anything that you can do with that in terms of a learning objective. So step 3 is, what learning objective does this meet? Describe how the activity has contributed to your skills, knowledge or attitude. It could be beneficial to consider the good medical practice framework domains and think about how that can link into your reflective practice. So for example, just in case, thinking about knowledge, skills and performance, safety and quality, communication, partnership and teamwork and maintaining trust. Step 4. What have you learned from this event? So here you really need to start to articulate whether you have any knowledge gaps that you need to work on, how this will improve your quality and patient safety in the workplace. Also consider whether this event reinforces certain aspects of you as a doctor. Finally, based on this experience, what will you do differently next time you're in this situation? Step 5. Future developmental needs. So if you've identified other learning needs from this event, what will you do to rectify this for the future? Everyone, I need you to have a look at this slide and ask yourself this question. When was the last time that you thought about your career development? When we originally ran this as a webinar, the answers were quite interesting. So it came up with 4 key things. Regular intervals throughout the year. Once a year when my appraisal is due, no surprises. When I'm looking for a new post. Or, for the brave people out there, not for ages. And one of the things that revalidation allows you to really do is to actually think about your career development in a positive way. Because what you're allowing yourself to do is to plan ahead over the next 5-year period. So at each stage, when you are going through revalidation, you can take stock. You can think about, where am I now? But actually, where do I want to be career-wise over the next 5 to 10 years? And actually, how can I make sure that I'm working towards that in the context of my appraisals and revalidation? And that really is such a positive way to think about revalidation. And for what I'd really like everyone to do is to think about that question, note it in your mind, and just think, well, actually, how often am I really doing it? Because what we'd really love is the first one, regularly throughout the year. Because one of the challenges that you have when you're trying to do reflective practice is that if you don't do it straight away, you can't remember everything that happened. And so you're then going backwards to go forwards. All of you will be very familiar with goal setting because it's something that happens within the context of your appraisal, it happens within job planning. But more often than not, if you're thinking about this in the context of your career, you could start to begin to create what I would call a career action plan. It makes sense to tie it into goal setting in the context of your clinical practice because it enables you to really bring the two together. Now, what I'm particularly interested in you thinking about is over the next period of time, what can you actually take away from today that you can start to work on? Now, if you are going to do it, I really want something which you can actually be very specific with in terms of a plan. You need to be able to think about how you might measure it. Is it attainable? How relevant is it to your practice? And more often than anything else, it needs to have a time to it. Because if it has there with no time, it won't get done. We plan our holidays better than we plan our careers. And it needs time bound to make it work. So that's what I'm hoping for. And if we can get that out of today, I'll be very pleased. What we wanted to really do was provide you with a snapshot of some of the frequently asked questions that we received when we were doing the live webinar. Because we're anticipating if those questions came out then, they may well be pertinent to you. In total, there were roughly about 25 questions. And what we'll have available for you to review is a PDF that actually has each of those with the responses. So as you cast your eyes over these, you'll see that some of them will be particularly relevant to you. I'm not going to go through each of the responses now, but you'll have a chance to review that at your own time.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the BMA for letting us contribute to this excellent session, and Susie particularly. Just wanted to let you know that if you have any concerns which are individual to you about revalidation, there will be lots of them I'm sure, that you can contact us. The GMC Contact Centre on 0161 923 6277 has people waiting for your individual call and can answer all the questions about your personal circumstances, your revalidation dates and individual situations. You can also email queries to revalidation@gmc-uk.org and again we'll respond to your queries and questions. I'm part of a regional liaison service from the GMC and there's a hyperlink there to find out information about our service, and we're always available to come and do sessions for doctors on revalidation and we can then look at your individual concerns and questions. Thank you.
There's a number of useful resources that are available to help you with your revalidation. The BMA have a section on their site called BMA Revalidation Support, as do the GMC. Use them. They're really fantastic. And the other part that you also have available is within the BMJ. There's some really interesting articles and thoughts around revalidation. I think there are 3 key things there is enough, but we also have prepared a useful resources downloadable sheet that accompanies the audio presentation. What I wanted to say is that throughout the presentation, we've mentioned a number of elements, and what I want to make sure that you know that you've got to hand is the following. We have the resource guide. We have a checklist of supporting information that will be on hand that you can download. I also thought it might be useful to have the reflective writing and practice as a one-page document that you could have a look at beyond today. And then finally, we're just moving on. What we were aiming to try and do today within this audio presentation was to, first of all, the first half, was to start to think about how you can prepare for your upcoming revalidation. I hope that we've been able to do that for you. But in addition to that, to sort of start to share insights and tips on how you can create a list of things that you need to gather over the 5-year period. The second half of the session was looking at actually how do you articulate that? What do you need to do? How do you put it down? And just ideas about how you can start to begin to do that. And finally, just very briefly thinking about the positive impact that revalidation has for your own career and professional development. A huge thank you from BMA Careers and GMC.